War hero. President of the Reichstag. Creator of the feared Nazi Air Force, the Luftwaffe. Sentenced war criminal. This is the story of the German Nazi politician, Hermann Göring. The story of Hermann Göring begins on the 12th of January 1893 when he was born in the scenic Bavarian city of Rosenheim. His father was named Heinrich Göring, and his mother Franziska Tiefenbrunn. Heinrich was German consul to Haiti at the time of Hermann's birth, and his mother left him with family back in Germany when Hermann was only 6 weeks old. He didn't see his parents again until he was 3 years old, when his parents moved back to Germany. Shortly after the Görings returned to Germany, Franziska took a lover. Her husband's friend, the wealthy Jewish doctor Hermann Eppenstein. Eppenstein provided the Görings with lodging at Weldenstein Castle outside of Pegnitz in Upper Bavaria. Göring was interested in becoming a soldier from an early age. At age 11 he was sent to boarding school, but performed poorly. He sold his violin and bought a train ticket home. He took up again his interest in military affairs, continued to play war games and pretended to lay siege to his family home. He also took up mountain climbing, in both Germany and Austria. At age 16, Göring was admitted to the military academy at Berlin-Lichterfeld. And in 1912 he joined the Prince Wilhelm Regiment of the Prussian Army. As Göring was stationed in Mulhausen only a mile from the French border with his regiment, his mother ended her affair with Eppenstein and his family moved to Munich, where his father Heinrich died shortly after. In the summer of 1914, the First World War broke out, and Göring was still stationed in Mulhausen. Warfare in the damp trenches on the Western Front took its toll on Göring's body, and he was soon hospitalized with rheumatism, about 1 year into the war. While Göring was recovering he was convinced by his friend Bruno Lorzer to apply for a transfer to the Air Force, but the application was turned down. Although the application was turned down, Göring managed to secure an appointment as an observer on board Lorzer's airplane. The pair was then assigned to the German Fifth Army, commanded by no other than Crown Prince Wilhelm. After Göring finished his training as a pilot, he was assigned as a fighter pilot to the Jagdstaffel 5. He was soon seriously injured during combat and was once again out of action for a while. This time for a whole year. In February 1917, Göring is assigned to Jagdstaffel 26, commanded by his friend Lorzer. Göring now embarked on a successful career as a fighter pilot. He scored victory after victory, and earned several awards and distinctions. Among them the Zähringer Lion, the House Order of Hohenzollern and the highest order a German soldier could earn, the Blue Max. When the war ended in November 1918, Göring had earned 22 victories, and was in command of the Flying Circus, Red Baron Manfred von Richthofen's old outfit. As the war ended, Göring refused his commander's order of surrendering his airplanes to the Allies. He rather ordered his men to fly them to Darmstadt and crash-land them there, so they would be of no use to Germany's enemies.
After the war, Göring wanted to continue his career in aviation. He tried barnstorming, and he worked at German airplane manufacturer Fokker before he moved to Denmark, and then Sweden where he worked for a Swedish airline. He also took on extra jobs as a private pilot. One of his customers was the Swedish Count, Erik von Rosen, who one day hired Göring to fly him, from Stockholm to his castle in rural Sweden. Here, Göring was to meet his future wife, Karin, for the first time. At this point, she was married to Count Nils Gustav von Kantzow. It was also probably there that Göring for the first time saw what would later become the symbol of the German Nazi Party, the swastika, which was used as a personal symbol for Count von Rosen. Karin and Hermann spent a lot of time together in 1921, and when Göring moved back to Germany later that year to study political science, Karin obtained a divorce from her husband, and joined him. They were married on February 3, 1922 and got a house in a suburb of Munich. It was in 1922 that Göring was to hear his first speech by Adolf Hitler, and he soon after joined the Nazi Party. The next year, Hitler appointed him head of the SA, Sturmabteilung, the feared paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party. Later that year, Göring participated in Hitler's failed beer hall coup. As the coup makers was marching towards Feldherrnhall in Munich, Göring was shot in the groin. With the assistance of his wife Karin, he was smuggled to Austria, where he received surgery. This was the start of Göring's more than 20-year-long addiction to morphine, which lasted until he was imprisoned for the Nuremberg trials at the end of the Second World War. In early 1924, Göring traveled to Italy, and lived here for a while. It was on this trip he met with Italian fascist dictator, Benito Mussolini, for the first time. In 1925, Karin's mother fell ill, prompting the couple to seek financial aid from Nazi sympathizers to travel to Sweden through Eastern Europe. Once in Sweden, Göring's drug addiction worsened, leading to his confinement in Langbro Asylum in Stockholm. After an amnesty was declared in 1927, Göring returned to Germany and was elected to the Reichstag the following year as one of 12 Nazis, representing his home state of Bavaria. He held this seat until the fall of the Third Reich in 1945, using it to gain support for the Nazi cause among the upper class, such as future Minister of Finance Hjalmar Schacht, arms manufacturer Fritz Thyssen, and his former army commander, Crown Prince Wilhelm of Prussia. As the German economy tanked during the Great Depression, support for the Nazi Party soared. And in 1932 they became the largest party in the Reichstag, winning a staggering 230 seats. Göring was then elected Reichstag President, a post he would retain until the final weeks of the Third Reich in the spring of 1945. As Karin's health worsened, her weak heart and epilepsy became more of a burden. In 1931, she contracted tuberculosis, and her heart could not take it. On October 17, 1931, Karin passed away. As Hitler became Chancellor in January of 1933, Göring was appointed Minister without portfolio, and Reichscommissioner for Aviation. Even though Göring didn't have a designated portfolio, he didn't waste his time folding his hands. He was soon appointed Minister-President of Prussia, where his first major task was to establish a secret police force, called Geheime Staatspolizei, better known as Gestapo, in which he put the later infamous Heinrich Himmler in charge of. When the German Reichstag was set on fire on the 27th of February 1933, Reichstag President Göring was one of the first to arrive on the scene. The Nazis wasted no time, and used the fire as an excuse to crack down on communists and other left-wing opposition. Thousands of opponents was arrested, and the alleged arson, a Dutch communist sympathizer named Marius van der Lubbe was convicted for starting the fire, and was sentenced to death in a trial where Göring appeared as a witness. Who really started the fire has never been revealed. According to German General Franz Halder, at Adolf Hitler's birthday party in 1942, Hermann Göring confessed to have orchestrated the fire. Hitler, Göring and several other top Nazis became concerned about internal opposition in the party, and especially from Ernst Röhm, head of the brown shirts of the Sturmabteilung. They feared Röhm and his men was conspiring to overthrow the Hitler government and that the country would be taken over by the SA. Therefore, a little over 2 months after Himmler took over the Gestapo, Hitler and the rest of the party leadership put a plan into motion. A plan to eliminate all opposition to Hitler inside the party and in German politics. Along with Röhm, Several other Nazi Party members was arrested and executed, such as Gregor Strasser and Edmund Heinz. Also former Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher and Hitler and Göring's adversary during the failed coup attempt in Munich in 1923, Gustav von Kahr was among the executed. And thus all opposition to Hitler and Göring was gone. 1935 was good to Göring. In violation of the Versailles Treaty, Germany re-established an aviation wing of the armed forces, the Luftwaffe, with Reich Aviation Minister Göring as its commander-in-chief. Göring also married his second wife, the German actress Emmy Sundman. A grand reception was held at the Berlin Opera House, with no other than Adolf Hitler as the best man. The wedding was a significant PR event for the Nazis, and huge crowds gathered outside. Fighter aircraft from the freshly minted Luftwaffe flew over the party in a swastika formation, to salute their commander and his bride. The wedding reception was held at Göring's lavish home, Karen Hall, named after his first wife, furnished with luxury furniture and art looted from victims of the Nazi regime. 3 years later, Emmy would bring Göring his first and only child, a girl named Edda. When Edda was christened, Adolf Hitler would be her godfather. Göring had an obsession with luxuries, and used his position in the Nazi Party and the German government to acquire as much of it as possible. Properties. Art. Cars. Yachts. And an incredible 7 different pet lions. In 1936, Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring had a private discussion at the Obersalzberg, where Hitler informed Göring that the German military and economy had to be prepared for war within 4 years. To ensure this, Göring was tasked with creating a 4-year economic plan to increase the production of steel and other war essentials. Both Hitler and Göring were concerned about Germany's lack of natural resources, so they decided to focus on Austria, Hitler's homeland, which had an abundance of iron ore. After first trying to convince Austrian politicians to incorporate Austria into Germany, Hitler and Göring became tired of Austria's time-consuming democratic process, and in the early morning of March 11, 1938, German troops marched into Austria, meeting no military resistance, but plenty of cheering Austrian sympathizers. This would later be known as the War of Flowers. As Germany had set its eyes on several other neighboring countries, Göring got more and more involved in foreign policy. He took initiative to a meeting with Great Britain regarding Czechoslovakia, and went to Warsaw to convince Polish politicians that Germany had no intention of invading Poland. At the Nazi Party's Nuremberg rally later that year, Göring and other speakers denounced the Czechs as an inferior people. That fall Hitler and Chamberlain had several meetings, even one at Hitler's famous mountain retreat in the Obersalzberg, the Berghof. This series of meetings culminated in the Munich Agreement on the 29th of September, where Hitler and Germany was given the go to retake the Sudetenland, the border region of Czechoslovakia mainly inhabited by German-speaking people, but the rest of the country was to be left independent. In March the following year, Göring threatened Czechoslovakian President Emil Hácha with the bombing of Prague, which led to the regions of Moravia and Bohemia to be turned over to German control. In August of 1939, less than 2 weeks before the invasion of Poland, Hitler appointed Göring chairman of the newly established Council of Ministers for the Defense of the Reich, giving Göring even more military power. Other members were Rudolf Hess, Wilhelm Frick, Walther Funk, Wilhelm Keitel and Hans Lammers. A few hours after the invasion of Poland was underway, Hitler spoke to the Reichstag, announcing Göring as his successor as Führer in case anything were to happen to him. This formally put Göring above Rudolf Hess, Hitler's longtime number 2, in the Nazi power hierarchy. In the following year, Hermann Göring's Luftwaffe was essential in the invasions of Poland, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France, Germany's longtime adversary. This led to new medals and new titles for the glory-hungry Göring. Hitler awarded him the Grand Cross of the Iron Cross, and he promoted Göring to the freshly minted title of Reichsmarschall, making him the highest-ranking military officer in all of Germany. At this point, Göring was at the peak of his power, but he didn't know yet that his decline was about to unfold. As France was defeated in the summer of 1940, Hitler turned his eyes on his next prize, Great Britain. If Germany was to be able to successfully invade Great Britain, the Royal Air Force had to be destroyed. The task of annihilating the RAF fell to Göring and the Luftwaffe. Göring took on the task with his usual self-confidence, but after a few months of fierce fighting in the skies over southern England, it became evident that the RAF was not defeated and Britain was not gonna sue for peace as Göring had hoped. In October, Hitler put his plans to invade Britain off, for now, as winter was approaching. On the 22nd of June 1941, the Germans launched the invasion of the Soviet Union, and once again Göring's Luftwaffe was involved, destroying thousands of Soviet aircraft early on in the invasion, but failed to establish sufficient airfields on occupied Soviet territory in order to support the German invasion deeper into the Soviet Union. When Japan attacked the American Navy base at Pearl Harbor in December, the usually cautious Göring, along with Field Marshal Keitel and Admiral Raeder, urged Hitler to declare war on the United States as they believed the Americans were too weak and too fond of an easy, comfortable life to be good soldiers. Hitler listened, and now Germany was at war with the largest industrial and military might on the planet. In the summer of 1942, the fateful Battle of Stalingrad started. By the end of November, the Soviets managed to surround the German Sixth Army under the command of General Paulus. Göring bolstered that his Luftwaffe would be able to supply the surrounded German army with a minimum of 300 tons of supplies every day. This led to Hitler issuing his infamous "fight to the last man" order. As it turned out, the Luftwaffe was never even close to deliver on Göring's promise, and the entrapped Germans never stood a chance. Paulus had no choice but to surrender his troops to Soviet Commander General Zhukov in January. While the Germans and the Soviets were fighting on the Eastern Front, British and American bombers based in England started to wreak havoc on German cities, industry, and infrastructure. Göring's relationship with Hitler had never recovered after the failed Battle of Britain 3 years earlier and was not getting any better now. Göring became more isolated and spent more and more time on his plutocratic endeavors, getting his hands on as much loot from the occupied areas as he could, mainly valuable art stolen from victims of the Holocaust. Göring also started to spend a lot more time outside of Berlin. Among his favorite residences was his house in the Obersalzberg, close to Hitler's Berghof. The British-American bombing of Germany took its toll on the Luftwaffe, and when the Allies launched their invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, the previously feared Luftwaffe was only able to muster about 300 aircraft to take on the combined Allied air strength of more than 11,000 aircraft. Göring and Hitler last met on the Führer's birthday on April 20 in the Führerbunker in Berlin. Hitler thought that Göring was in a better position than him to negotiate peace with the Allies. As the Soviets was closing in on the bunker, Göring considered Hitler to be unable to act freely and thus declared that he was now the Führer of Germany. When this message reached Hitler, through his infamous private secretary Martin Bormann, known for his scheming and intrigue-making, Hitler became furious and forced him to resign from all his public offices. Hitler and Bormann then ordered the SS to place Göring under house arrest at the Obersalzberg, where Göring stayed until the place was bombed on the 26th of April. Göring was then moved to another of his residences, a castle at Moderndorf. When Hitler committed suicide a few days later, he expelled Göring from the party in his last will and testimony, making Admiral Karl Donitz the new president, and propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels the new chancellor, thus splitting Hitler's old office of Führer in two. On the 5th of May, a unit of Luftwaffe soldiers freed Göring from SS captivity and assisted him to the American lines, where he surrendered to American troops at Rastatt the next day. After being imprisoned, Göring was flown to Luxembourg to be held as a prisoner in Camp Ashcan, a palace hotel used to house prominent Nazi prisoners of war during the spring and summer of 1945. Here Göring's two-decade-long addiction to morphine started to wear off, and he started to lose weight. A staggering 60 pounds in just 3 months. His IQ was also tested and found to be 138. When the trials of the Nazi war criminals started at Nuremberg, Göring was the second highest-ranking Nazi on trial, only junior to former Reich President Dönitz. Göring was charged with all 4 charges that the accused could be tried for: conspiracy, waging war of aggression, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Göring claimed he did not know about the atrocities committed in the concentration camps, and claimed to be shocked by the videos the court was shown from the camps. He placed the blame for the camps on Himmler, who was head of the SS. American prosecutor Robert Jackson, however, presented evidence that Göring had known about the extermination of Jews in Hungary, that Göring had plotted with other top Nazi to confiscate Jewish-owned art and other valuables, and that he could have stopped the execution of 50 escaped prisoners of war from Stalag Luft III. When the verdict was out, Göring was sentenced to death along with 10 other top Nazi officials. A few hours before he was to hang as the first of the convicted Germans, Göring committed suicide in his prison cell with a cyanide capsule and died on October 15, 1946.